just because you're probably not going to be ready to do this quite yet. But later on, when the time comes, and maybe it's been a few weeks and you've forgotten, you're going to want to kind of maybe check in with the video, ask a classmate who's done it, or ask Mrs. Beauvert about the process. So once you have all of your pieces fitting together pretty well on your template, first you're going to want to clean all the pieces. All right, you can see like Ava's are fitting pretty nicely together, but they're pretty grimy from the dust from the grinder. So you're going to want to bring them over to the sink, wash them, soapy water. If the Sharpie numbers come off, redraw them on. Okay, it's really helpful. We talked a bit about that yesterday, about making sure the pieces, especially when you have geometrics, that you're not confusing a piece for a piece. You might think that they're two squares, but they actually fit together quite differently. So make sure you're keeping track of how the pieces fit together. If you have pieces that might look different upside down or backwards or upside, different, make sure you're keeping track of that too. So it's fine to have Sharpie marks, but before you do the foiling, you're going to want to have the pieces clean, especially on the edges, and you're going to want to remove those paper templates if you're using them. Okay? So remember, we talked when we started stained glass about the process. The solder that you're applying, this metal, won't stick directly to the glass. It's only going to stick to the metal tape, this copper tape. So you're going to need to apply the copper tape around all the edges of your piece. So to do that, it's pretty straightforward, but there are some kind of tricks to making sure it's going to stick really well. So again, having the piece clean and dry is helpful to start. This is actual metal. It's just pounded out really thin so it's nice and pliable, and it's sticky on one side. Try not to touch the sticky too much because it will kind of wear off and not be sticky where and when you need it to be. You're going to need to start and kind of line it up, and this is sometimes the trickiest part, is making sure you lay it down centered. All right, you don't want to have just a tiny overlap on one side and a huge overlap on the other. You want it to be fairly even. That's going to help the solder stick to both sides evenly. Okay, so you're going to wrap it right around. And again, I kind of like to do it like at an angle so I can see how it's laying down. Then when you get back to your starting point, you'll just have a pair of scissors and you'll just snip. You can leave like a 1/4 inch overlap. Okay, the metal will stick to the metal. That's fine. You don't want a gap though. All right. So once it's on there, I'm just going to smooth the edges with my fingers and make sure it's centered. I'm going to give it a quick visual. If there's anything that I need to fix, I can pull it off carefully and kind of re-stick it. If you pull it off and stick it on too many times, the adhesive is not going to be sticky anymore. So you can just get a new piece, okay? Once it's on there, then I'm going to start kind of from the middle pieces, or the middle edges, and just use my fingers and just lightly kind of press them over the gaps or over the kind of edges. The corners are tricky because it's sharp metal, and it's kind of like wrapping a present. If you have fingernails, you can get your fingernails in there and kind of fold one side down and then the other. If you don't have fingernails, or you'd rather use one of these tools, I have all of these different tools that are all made for this purpose. You'll see these plastic ones have lots of different types of edges that you can really get in there and kind of fold. I kind of like this metal tool to kind of press down the edges like that. Okay. Now I'm just kind of loosely pressing down everything at first, just to make sure it's all stuck and even and get in the corners. All right, pass that around and feel it. Do it quickly so everyone can see it. But a lot of people will just stop there. And that's good. It gets the metal on there, but it's not really stuck. You can't rely just on that little kind of sticker to hold it on. Because remember, you're going to have heat. You're going to be heating up kind of liquid metal to attach. You want to make sure that that solder holds your piece of glass together, especially if it's something that might hang, right? Gravity's going to pull it down. You want to do everything you can to ensure that the next step, the soldering, is going to go well. So you don't want to just stop by just loosely pressing it with your fingers. What you want to do is something called burnishing. So burnishing means you're really gonna put some pressure and force into rubbing that metal so it's nice and smooth and even. You can feel how in that piece there are some seams, it's kind of bubbled up in some spots. So what I'm gonna do is use one of these tools and I'm gonna burnish, all right? So see how it's kind of puckered and folded? I'm gonna use this nice smooth tool and I'm gonna go around all the edges and I'm gonna press it down nice and securely. So this is really sticking the adhesive to the glass and also smoothing out the metal so there aren't big chunks or folds or gaps. I'm using some pressure on this, so I'm using the table to support the piece. I'm not holding it up in the air. I don't want to accidentally risk the piece breaking. All right, so hold it flat on the table. Again, try different tools. People are gonna find like a tool that they really like. You might hate it, but you might find something else that works. So I have a pretty good assortment of different sizes and shapes and styles of burnishing tools. Okay, this is probably the most boring step, but it's one of the most critical to ensure that you'll have a good soldered piece in the end. Okay, so I went around the edges. I'm also gonna go on the sides like that. Okay, so I'll pass this around again and hopefully you should see and feel the difference. If you kind of pull from the middle of the piece out to the edge, your finger shouldn't get caught on anything. It should feel nice and smooth and even. And again, if you're not sure if you've done it well enough, here's one I did this morning, same thing. You know, have a classmate check it, have Mrs. Bovair check it to make sure it's kind of really attached. Okay? Make sense? Yes, perfect. So we can